Sarajevska sigurnosna konferencija je mjesto na kojem se vrlo često nađu ljudi koji su vrlo važni kada je u pitanju vanjska politika. Jedna od tih osoba je Nathalie Tocci, direktorica Instituto Affari Internazionali, osoba koja se vrlo mnogo sluša kada je u pitanju vanjska politika i njeno mišljenje vrlo često čuju oni koji donose odluke, a i savjetovali ih je. Nathalie Tocci, welcome to program N1.
Wonderful to be with him.
You're someone who advised European politicians, but also when you speak, I know that they listen to what you say, and not only in Europe, but around the world. But this situation today is probably unseen in the last several decades, especially after this speech of US President Donald Trump at the UNGA earlier this week. How do you see that speech? Because that speech presented to us a new perspective on the world coming from Washington, and it doesn't look like it's aligned with the rest of the world, especially with European countries.
Yes, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think it speaks of an America that is out there not just to abandon, but destroy the international order that it had played such a crucial role in building, starting with the United Nations and beyond that, obviously, in all of the institutions that were built both in the post-war and in the post-wall period, right? So in a sense, in the post-war period, we're really talking about the basis of international law. And as we move into the post-wall period, all of those thicker principles and norms that have to do with democracy and freedoms and all the rest of it. Essentially, what Donald Trump represents is someone that believes that not only the United States no longer benefits from that system, but he is out there to tear it down both internationally and to tear it down domestically. Domestically, it's quite clear that the US is in many respects in, if we can use a term, from the French Revolution, in the Jacobin phase of the revolution, right? I mean, it's about destroying an order. And I think we can say likewise when it comes to the broader international order. What remains, I think, unanswered, and what I think the Trump speech does not actually provide much of an indication of, because it actually depends not just on what the United States will do, but what everyone else will do, is the new system that we're going to be moving towards a system in which there are no rules at all, in which it is just the survival of the fittest. It's a world of empires, in which sovereignty and territorial integrity play no role, in which colonialism in different forms, whether it's Israel's colonialism in the Middle East or Russia's colonialism in Eastern Europe, or the US's colonialism in Greenland. So is that the world that we're headed into? Or are we talking about a world in which there are different power centers? Maybe it's more transactional than the world as it used to be, but there is still a modicum of rules that have to do with the UN Charter that everyone adheres to. And I think that's basically what's up for grabs at the moment. But as I said, that will depend not, in my view, on either only or not even principally on what the US does, but on how everyone else reacts.
Yeah, and what we saw as a reaction recently when it comes to Ukraine is grouping of people in Europe, leaders in Europe, and what was interesting to me is that that group was formed somehow between those who will tell him no and those who are whisperers to him, such as Alex Stubb, who came just to, if not appease him, maybe just to give him a bit of tranquility when they speak with him. Is that the way to deal with him from European perspective? To have, for example, Merz, Macron and Starmer to be no-sayers? and to have, for example, Meloni, Rutte, and Stubb to be like, Donald, wait a second, listen to them, what they have to say?
I actually wouldn't characterize that way the difference. In a sense, actually, I would almost put it in a reverse perspective. I don't think, so let's put Macron to one side. I don't think that Merz or Starmer have stood up to Trump very much at all. I think that they have been main players in the knee bending and over flattery and self-humiliation. I mean, you know, think about the invitation completely against protocol for the second visit to the king, right? That Starmer offered to Donald Trump.
The pulling of the letter.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure that there has been, you know, sort of those that keep their back straight and those that bend. I do see the merit in having or trying to have a good personal rapport. So if there are some European leaders that are better in that respect, you know, I mean, it's clear that Trump quite likes my prime minister. If, you know, I mean, Alex's golf skills can come to the rescue, that's fine. And I'm not saying that it should not be done. I do have questions, though, as to what its actual substantial utility is. I think there would be a substantial utility if we used the, in a sense, the placating the hatred that the Trump administration has towards Europe. If we used these people to placate that, if we use these people to say we're going to, in this way, gain some time and use this time to actually detach ourselves more from the United States, then I would see a purpose. But if it is just flattery for flattery's sake, you know, flattery because you don't want to punch in the face immediately, not because you want to avoid that punch in the face so as to avoid the punch in the face tomorrow, right? Then, you know, it's really much of a short-term game.
Where is in that game European Union? Because Ursula von der Leyen, Costa are almost non-existent when it comes to those negotiations and talks. And Kaja Kallas was more blunt when she was Estonian Prime Minister than she is now as a quote-unquote Foreign Minister of European Union. Can they find their niche in that geopolitical game, or everything will be left in the hands of these leaders, which we just discussed?
Well, I mean, I think both von der Leyen and Kallas, and especially von der Leyen, have definitely fallen into the category of the knee bending and self-humiliation. I mean, just think about the image of von der Leyen's thumbs up in Scotland. I mean, that's almost as bad as Rutte and his WhatsApp messages. And his daddy, exactly. You know, so I mean, so I definitely think that there's been a lot of self-humiliation coming from the Commission and to an extent the High Representative. Now, I think at the same time it is fair to say that did von der Leyen really have much of an alternative? And this is why we do come back to member states. I think that the member states actually weakened her. The minute in which the member states, let's take trade as an example, the trade, you know, Liberation Day announced, markets basically start crashing down, you know, I mean, not just the stock market, the bond market. China basically gives the middle finger to Donald Trump, right? If at that point in time, rather than having this raucous European debate, and this was not the Commission, these were member states saying, oh, we shouldn't retaliate, oh, maybe we should, oh, we shouldn't, oh, we should. If at that point in time, we would have done what, legally speaking, we should do, this is an exclusive EU competence, Ursula, you do the negotiation, maybe, I don't know, but maybe she would have wielded the stick, yeah? The fact that member states undercut her ended up with the thumbs up in Scotland. So, you know, is it just her personal inclination? No, I think that she was deliberately weakened by member states.
When we are speaking about member states who are weakening EU, we have two players who are playing a card of Russia constantly, that's Fico and Orban. But also, what is your view of your prime minister? Because when she became a prime minister, we were expecting the worst from her, but somehow at the moment the opinion is still somewhere in the middle. There are people who are saying that she's bad, people are saying that she's good, depending on the situation from time to time.
So she's a far-right leader. She's a far-right nationalist, Eurosceptic leader. And anyone who has any illusions is delusional, completely. Now, she is a far-right nationalist, Eurosceptic leader who's also smart. And because she's smart, she has been able to play rather effectively and to confuse at times, right? Her big weapon in this respect has been Ukraine, right? Because she has used her support for Ukraine to hide a number of other things, both that she's been doing internally in the country as well as internationally. Now, so long as we have Trump where he is now, i.e. a Trump which is not stabbing Ukraine actively in the back, but that basically says, it's your thing, Europeans, yeah? I mean, we don't really, if you want to buy our weapons, we can make some money out of it, and you can buy our weapons for Ukraine, but no more than that. So long as that's...
Or to tell them, put the sanctions on Russia, and then I will put the sanctions on them.
Exactly. So long as this is the space that we're in, she will continue to be able to navigate and not expose herself. If, for the sake of argument, instead we do get to a scenario, and we still could get to a scenario, in which there is that very deliberate break with the United States on Ukraine, then she would drop Ukraine. She would follow Trump. I have no doubt whatsoever, you know. In the, let's call it MIGA agenda, Make Italy Great Again agenda, that is her agenda, Ukraine does not play a role. Having a good relationship with Trump's America has an important role. So if you can manage to keep both things, better. She's not anti-Ukraine, don't get me wrong. I mean, she's not a closeted pro-Russian. In fact, I actually think that in her heart of hearts, she even believes that Ukraine's cause is the good cause. But it's not Italy's cause. You know, this is a nationalist leader. And what's important for a nationalist leader is to have a good relationship with the nationalist far-right leader-in-chief, and that's Donald Trump.
What about Fico and Orban?
Well, look, you know, and it may sound a little bit weird what I'm about to say. I actually don't think that... So, let me put it in these terms. If the problem was only Orban and Fico, it would be a totally manageable problem, right? Orban and Fico are leaders of two very small, and may I add, in some respects rather insignificant countries in the European Union. And there are ways and means of persuading. Withholding money is obviously a prime instrument here. There are ways and means of finding alternative rules. I mean, look at now what's happening. You know, the Commission will find a way to seize and use the Russian assets by basically somehow inventing a qualified majority procedure to move forward. It will happen. They would not be able to do it if it was, I don't know, France or Germany or Italy. I mean, if it was a large country, then there's no way this could happen. So the problem is not, quote unquote, Orban Fico. Of course, there are problems, yeah? The problem is that there are Orbanizing and Ficoizing trends across the European Union. That is what makes them so toxic, rather than just saying Hungary and Slovakia are the problem.
When we are speaking about this, Macron was supposed to be one of the two key leaders in Europe, but at the moment his domestic policy is utter and complete disaster for years and years, and he probably enabled Marine Le Pen to become if not president, then something big on the next election. But what I want to ask you is, he's playing a pretty significant role outside, and he is the leader outside. Where is that trouble between the inside and outside? Why he is not that much effective inside as much he is effective outside?
Well, he tries indeed to compensate his domestic weakness with international activism. However, I think that it's just a contrast in appearance. Because if you then, yes, the activism is there, but ask yourself, what has Macron's international activism actually achieved? What has it achieved on relations with the United States? What has it achieved in terms of moving forward a more ambitious European integration agenda? What has it achieved in terms of, I don't know, thinking about the U-turn of France over enlargement? The reason why Macron has not succeeded internationally, even if the activism and the ideas are there, and we have to give him credit for activism, ideas and courage too. He's got definitely all three, but they have not translated in action, also because of that domestic weakness. I mean, of course, also because of other players, right? But also because, so I actually don't think that these are in contradiction. I mean, ultimately, France will not will not be able to sort of play its role internationally, will not be able to punch its weight internationally unless it fixes that domestic problem. And as you were suggesting, and I would agree, those problems are just getting worse and worse and worse. They're not getting any better.
Let me introduce another player which is also important for this region, and that's Vladimir Putin. Alaska summit, everybody agrees, especially us in the foreign policy, was complete and utter disaster, and he walked away as a winner. But after that, he started poking the bear, which is called NATO, even more. And now we have that situation where Rutte is saying, oh, we are going to react if you do it once again. But are his threats similar to Donald's threats, where he says in the morning, if you don't do this, this, and this, I will do this, this, and this. And then in the afternoon, nothing happens and everything escalates even more. And could he try, while he's poking a bear on Ukraine, to destabilize areas or regions such as Western Balkans?
Yeah. Well, the answer very clearly is yes. The intent and the actions are very clear. And may I add, this is the perfect moment. This is, I mean, when are we ever going to have a moment like this? When are we ever going to have a moment in which Europe is being abandoned and betrayed by the United States, and it is still in this state of psychological shock of not really wanting to accept this, yeah? And it is still not where it should be in terms of defending itself militarily. It's a window of opportunity that will close, right? I mean, it will close because either something happens in America, less likely, or, as in something, you know, returning America to being a faithful transatlantic partner, or Europeans at some point will have to wake up and stop being delusional. And their build-up militarily is going to have effect, right? So this is the moment that Putin has to test the limits. And we've seen him test the limits, and as your question was implying, you test the limits because there's no reaction. And the more there is talk, 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 and no action, the more you carry on, the more you carry on, the more you carry on. Now, Putin does have, indeed, in a sense, a track record of, at some point, just going too far. Yeah, I mean, he's just done this constantly. Yeah, he's done this on Ukraine. He's done this with Trump. I mean, he could have basically achieved what he wanted from Trump, right? And yet it's always more and more and more and more. So, you know, maybe he is going to overstep this time too. And I think that, you know, in a twisted way, that's the only piece of good news, right? But it is clear. I mean, at this point, all of his incentives is to keep on pushing forward.
when we are speaking about Europe, let me ask you about this region. We know that Russian and Chinese and others, especially Turkey, are playing a role here in the region. Vučić is very close to Orban. He's autocratic leader in the region. Ex-president of Republika Srpska Milorad Dodik traveled several times to visit Orban after his sentence was confirmed. Also, he traveled to Moscow to meet with Lavrov and Putin. And EU is not doing much when it comes to enlargement because they're lost in their own inner fights. How do you see the situation in the region, and can this be a trouble for EU if they don't do something very quickly, because we know that they have also troubles in areas such as Moldova and Georgia?
Right. Well, very clearly the answer is yes. I mean, the question is, how are we going to unlock this deadlock? Which is more than a deadlock. I would say that it's a distraction. Yeah, I mean, we are distracted with other priorities. I think that at this point in time, the only possible, available, low-ish hanging fruits are breaking the glass ceiling on enlargement with Albania. Maybe Albania and Montenegro. I would have said more comfortably Albania and Montenegro had we talked maybe a year ago. Now maybe just Albania, I don't know. But if we manage to break that ceiling, then the question becomes, does this ignite? I mean, what kind of dynamic in the broader region does it ignite? Does it ignite a dynamic of saying, see, it's possible. It's possible. You know, and therefore those domestic politicians and movements and civil society and media that basically have been weakened up until now because the counter arguments say they're never going to let us in, they will now have an argument saying, see, it is possible, right? Or does it ignite the opposite dynamic of feeling even more left out? You're probably better placed than I am to answer that question. But I think at this point in time, the only achievable objective is to break that glass ceiling with one or two and then see basically whether this creates a different dynamic.
And let's end this conversation with the Middle East. We know that the Biden administration missed not the ball, but entire region with their failure on Gaza, and Trump administration in doing the same. And I just saw a soundbite of Kamala Harris, which says, I'm not anymore president, I don't have any responsibility for ending the war. But also we have a Netanyahu who's escalating in the region, and also there is mentioning of something what is really frightening, that the Tony Blair could be involved in Gaza as, I don't know, Governor General in the day after, probably in that Trump vision of Gaza as result. Is there really any view or sense that this can be resolved in a situation like this, with Trump on the one side and Bibi without control on the other side, and Europeans and the rest, including the Gulf, MIA?
So, I mean, obviously very difficult to see. Let me, though, say just two things, which I don't know if we can define them as reasons for hope, but whether it's hope or not hope, it is, I think, two elements which I think are beginning to build up momentum, which could lead to a reversal of the current trends, which are, I think, exactly as you depicted them. The first is, are we getting internationally, including Europeans, but internationally, to a South African moment for Israel? Yeah? And what I mean by that, of course, is apartheid South Africa was strongly backed by the West. This was not the West all of a sudden finding its morality. It was constant and building, pressure from civil society that at some point obliged the West to change tack, right? So, and I think we're beginning to see this, you know, I mean, Israel is becoming so extreme that you're seeing this pressure build up in the spheres of culture, Eurovision, sports competitions, you know, the whole movement basically is pressuring. I mean, in Italy, a couple of days ago, we had an entire general strike for Gaza. I mean, the country stopped for Gaza. There will come a point, question mark, in which governments cannot continue to ignore this. You know, why has the Commission, even if still in a rather timid way, started putting proposals on various sanctioning measures? Is it because von der Leyen has discovered her morality? No, it's because the pressure is building. So I think there's a question of whether, you know, and maybe the genocide will be completed by the time we get there, but is there going to be a South African tipping point, basically, for Israel? And then the second dynamic that could change things is, look, you know, every action leads to a reaction. Once upon a time, Iran was viewed as the major revisionist actor in the Middle East. And at the end of the day, everything that fell into the space of the normalization agreements and all the rest of it was the product of that, right? Now, which is the revisionist actor in the Middle East? It's Israel. Yeah? I mean, it's Israel that bombs the shit out of Lebanon and Syria, and forget Gaza. I mean, Qatar, right? I mean, Qatar, main US ally, hosting the major US base in the Middle East, and Israel. So all this is leading already to...
And saving their people in Gaza, and they're attacking that country which is trying to help them.
Exactly. So this is leading to a different dynamic between the Gulf states and Iran, between the Gulf states, Iran and Turkey. So that's what I'm saying. Action leads to reaction, yeah? And in that space as well, more at the regional level, there is also the beginning of an idea of a different regional order.
Nathalie Tocci, thank you so very much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Čuli ste šta kaže jedna od vodećih stručnjakinja za vanjsku politiku u Evropi. Slika nije nimalo dobra, ali postoje neki mali znaci da bi se nešto pozitivno moglo desiti. Ostanite uz naš program.